I am part of a group of sociologists and psychologists that are interested in the way that social circumstances, life events, social relationships impact um, people biologically. They get under people's skin and actually influence their health. I'm sure that sounds really abstract. And so what I hope to do today is make this more concrete by talking more specifically about a particular outcome, which is um, biological aging. So let me first of all share my screen. Okay, so explain differences in the speed or rate of biological aging, um, which may sound like a pretty dry topic, but when you get to be my age, you'll realize that that's really a very significant topic. Um, all right, so let me note first of all what you already know, because it sets the stage for what we're going to talk about, which is that the human lifespan has been expanding tremendously. That's pretty exciting. So in many countries, people live to be in their mid-80s on average. But it is the case that the health span just is not keeping pace. So um, people are living a long time, but those last few years are limping along oftentimes with uh, several chronic illnesses that they're trying to manage. The National Institute of Aging in the last few years has decided that we need to switch strategies. If we're going to expand the health span, then what we're doing isn't working. And they suggest that instead of trying to cure each of the various chronic illnesses like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and so on, we should be focusing upon the underlying roots uh, of all of these diseases, and that is biological aging. Old age and the physical decline that it uh, indicates increases vulnerability to all of the chronic illnesses that eventually kill us. And so if we could identify the factors, significant factors that influence the speed of biological aging, there would be the hope, the National Institute of Aging argues, that we can slow down aging and expand the health span. We may not live longer, but we won't have that several-year period of misery due to chronic illness. Okay, so in order to do that, we need a clear-cut measure of speed of aging. So let's talk a little bit about that quickly. So how do you measure pace or rate of aging? So the mechanisms that underlie biological aging are kind of known, but there's a lot to learn yet. But one thing is really clear, and that is that epigenetic changes are a fundamental component of the process. Epigenetic factors, you might wonder, what is that? Well, they switch genes on or off. They influence gene expression. They dictate whether a gene is upregulated or downregulated. So that means epigenetic processes are really, really important because DNA just kind of lies there dormant and not doing anything. And if it's going to do anything biologically, it needs to be brought to life by epigenetic factors. One of the most pervasive and well-studied epigenetic mechanisms is methylation. When a methyl group attaches to a segment of DNA, it inhibits expression of that gene, especially if the methylation occurs in the promoter region of the gene. So I'm sorry, I'm get a little bit technical here for a little bit, but it'll be important and there'll be a payoff hopefully later. So methylation, when it appears in a segment of DNA, it tends to downregulate that gene. When it dissipates or disappears, then that gene tends to express itself. Now, importantly, since the 1960s, researchers have been aware of the strong association between age and DNA methylation in many sites around or throughout the human genome. So there are many places in the genome where the older you get, the more methylation tends to kind of to build up in those sites. And then you've got other sites where, as age progresses, methylation declines. So you've got genes that are gradually turning on and turning off various parts of the body um, with age via this mechanism of methylation. So given this pattern, what people recognized a few years ago is that you could use the presence or absence of methylation tags at various sites on the human genome to to make a prediction about how a person is aging. And this will be the last technical slide, I promise. So that's given rise then to epigenetic clocks. Epigenetic clocks are based on various sites throughout the genome where the level of methylation is strongly associated with age. A person's biological age then can be calculated by summing their methylation scores across the sites included in that index. Now, really, this is pretty cool because it means that you can look at the methylation pattern displayed in a person's body, and by looking at which sites are methylated and which ones aren't, you can make a prediction about how old they are biologically. And then you can subtract their chronological age from that, and you've got a measure of the extent to which an individual is either accelerated or decelerated in terms of how fast they're aging. You've got a measure of how fast their biological clock is ticking, and that's pretty cool. I mean, it's there's nothing really quite like this. Importantly, these longitudinal, well, let me back up. If it was just cool, then that would be one thing. But it's more than just cool. It's really consequential because longitudinal studies of samples from countries throughout the world have demonstrated that there are that these indices, these methylomic clocks, or epigenetic clocks, are robust predictors of biomarkers of health, all the things that when you go in for your annual physical day assay, like blood lipids and blood sugar and kidney function and so on, it predicts all that stuff. Also, it predicts onset of chronic illness. It predicts your physical appearance, the extent to which you look old, your cognitive decline, and finally, time to death. I mean, so that's a pretty robust measure. Now, given that this is the case, and actually there are several of these, and the most recent ones, which we'll talk about in a little bit, are the ones that are really most powerful. But this raises questions regarding the causes of accelerated or decelerated epigenetic changes. So why do some people age faster than others? And you would undoubtedly say, if I asked you that, is genes, which you inherit from your parents. And you'd be partially correct in that about 40% of the variance between people is a function of the DNA that you inherit. But that means that well over half is due to some other things that we may well be able to control, and therefore could intervene in the speed at which someone is aging. Now, as social scientists, we're interested in the question, are social conditions and experiences, as well as lifestyle, a part of the story? And what we do is we draw blood from our study respondents, we calculate these biological clocks, and then we examine the extent to which socioeconomic, psychosocial, and lifestyle data collected over the life course of our subjects predicts their speed of biological aging. And so let me show you then, with the remainder of my time, what we found. First of all, our very first study just looked at the extent to which economic hardship would might influence speed of aging. And you can see here's income. Here is these people are older than their chronological age. These people are younger. The numbers actually stand for years. And so if you're making approximately 10K a year in our sample, you're about 2 years older biologically than you are within your chronological age. And if you're making 100K a year, you're about 3.5 to 4 years younger biologically than your chronological age. So having enough money to be comfortable is good for your biological aging. We then looked at neighborhood conditions, and if you ask the question, does a disadvantaged neighborhood impact your speed of aging? The answer is yes. It accelerates aging by about 9 months. By the way, in all this research that I'm going to be showing you today, we're controlling for things like diet and exercise and smoking and so on. One of the most exciting clocks is the Grimm age clock. It's got 1,000 methylation sites. It is so good at predicting time to death that it's called Grimm age, named after the Grim Reaper. And you can see here the kinds of things that it predicts. And in our data, education, income, and marriage are significantly associated with decelerated Grimm age, whereas living in a disadvantaged neighborhood, discrimination, and financial hardship are associated with accelerated Grimm age. Differences in speed of aging appear to emerge early in life. We've known for a long while that childhood adversity predicts chronic illness in middle age. As a matter of fact, the relationship is so strong in the American Heart Association. If you look at their website, they describe childhood adversity as a risk factor for coronary heart disease. So our thought was, well, maybe this is because childhood adversity increases your speed of aging, and it does. So in their mid-50s, those who were had experienced significant amounts of child adversity were 4.6 years older than their chronological adult age. And using a different measure, POAM index, it indicated that they were aging at a pace of 1.15 years annually, or that would be about 430 days every 365 days. So speed of biological aging starts to get calibrated early in life and tends to be maintained over time. But here's the good news, is that when you look at people in middle age from about age 50 to 60, what we found is that during that decade, people are still showing a lot of change in their speed of aging, about a third increase by at least a year in their speed of aging, and about a third decrease. And so then you can ask the question, do changes in social and psychological factors impact these changes in speed of aging, for better or worse? And the answer is yes. And I won't go over all these findings. Let's just show you one. Like, if during middle age you fall in hard times and you have to move in with your adult kids, that's a very strong predictor of an increase in biological aging. That's very stressful. Lastly, we looked at incarceration, and we know that incarceration is extraordinarily stressful for people. They oftentimes come out with PTSD. They almost always have lasting poor health conditions, and they oftentimes suffer premature death. So our thought was, well, does incarceration itself tend to accelerate aging? The answer is yes. The effect is for men and for women, and it can be relatively short sentences of just a year or so. And the effect is really strong if you were the victim of assault while you were in prison, either at the hands of fellow prisoners or guards. I'll show you just one other thing. That is, the Grimm age scores, they correlate 0.32 between married or cohabitating romantic partners. So romantic partners tend to have similar rates of aging, which is really pretty amazing because there's no genetic effect operating here at all. So it appears to be the case that romantic partners share a life, and apparently this shared life somehow gives rise to similar rates of aging. This will be something we'll be investigating in the future. So, conclusion, takeaway message. The events and circumstances we experience over the life course influence, for better or worse, our speed of biological aging and, in turn, onset of chronic illness and the time till death. This line of research is in its infancy, but it would seem to have important policy and intervention implications, but this is not the time or place to sort those out.